Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today we're going to be putting those SSD drives we got in from a YouTube subscriber over in the UK named Sasha, and he was kind enough to send us a couple of SanDisk 1 terabyte Ultra 2 SSD drives. And what the plan is we're going to put one of these in each one of those Dell servers. And we're going to do that today. And then I'm going to show you how to transfer or move the virtual machines from your spinning hard drives onto your SSD drives, if that's what you choose to do. Now, in the second Dell server, the one that was donated by subscribers, that one already has a SanDisk 256 gig SSD drive in there. So what we'll do is we'll put this drive in along with it, then we'll transfer the machines off it. And then I'll pull that SSD drive out because I have other plans for it in another machine. And then in my main production Dell, we will put this in and we will transfer the machines from the spinning hard drives and put all that data onto the SSD, and then we will remove the spinning hard drives that are in that Dell server. So the object is I'm going to have, what we're going to end up with when all is said and done, is we'll have 2 SAS drives in each one of those Dell servers. Those will be for the operating system. Those are the drives that the Dell came with. And then we'll have 1 SSD drive to store all the virtual machines and run them off of. So we should see a pretty darn good increase in speed once we get that done. So without further ado, let's get these things installed and get on with the video. Alright, so let's get this drive mounted. And remember, when we mount these drives in these Dell trays, it's kind of a funky arrangement, but it does work. And that is, we need to put the SSD drive right at the edge and use these 2 screw holes to hold the drive in. Now, there's no screw holes under here that line up to line it up, but you know, these things are so light. You know, you can criticize me for it if you want and say, hey, you should always have all 4 screws in there, but you know, it'll hold it with 2. These things aren't going to go anywhere. So let's see if we can't find a couple of screws to mount this thing with, and luckily I was given some screws that came with my Synology NAS. And I think these will work in this SSD drive. There's got to be the right thread. And then I'll show you what I'm talking about. You know, one of my subscribers, God love them, said, hey, you should get that adapter for the 2.5-inch drives to the 3.5-inch drive bay, and he's probably right. But here's the point I'm trying to make. I've got 2 screws in it, and what he was concerned about is this edge lifting. And as you can see, if it's going to lift, it's not going to lift very much. Those 2 screws hold it in there pretty securely. So let's go ahead and get this installed in the Dell server, and then we'll boot up that server. We're going to do the lab server first. So there's the completed drive. Oh, and let me put my screws away because these are going to be hard to come by. They're not hard to come by. It's hard to enter a description of the screw if you don't know the screw's dimensions to find it on Amazon or wherever. And I have no idea what size screws those are, so it would take me forever to find them online. Okay, so let's cut over to the server now. All right, let's see if I can get in the server room without tripping over the tripod. And, you know, this thing has, I think it already has that SSD in down here. Yes, it does. And then it has a spinning drive here. Yes, it does. Okay. So, I'm going to go ahead and put this in slot number 4 for now. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if you put it in slot 4, don't you need to keep it in slot 4? And I don't think so. I think I can put it in slot 4, format it, make it part of the array controller part of the drives, and then move it over later to the other slot. But for now, we'll leave it in there. Now we need to go to the PC, to my workstation, and boot up this Dell, and go into that controller and format that or get that drive initialized and ready for the array, or ready for the server. All right, so here we are at the iDRAC for the lab Dell. So let's go ahead and power that sucker on. I don't see any magic smoke or white smoke coming out of the server, so we will see if it finds a drive here. Okay, I see the two SAS drives spinning up. Okay, I've got lights on both my SSDs now. Alright, so it's telling me it's got a charge. That's fine. Alright, so it tells me a virtual device is missing. I'm going to do C to load the controller. Let's see, entering will result in drive configure. Press yes to consider loading. Yes. Alright. So here's my boot drive, here's my SSD drive, and here is the unconfigured SSD drive. And it's only showing 960 or 890 gigabytes. That's alright. So I'm going to go up here to the root and press F2, and I'm going to create a new virtual disk. I'm going to choose this 897 gig, and we'll call this SSD. Let's just call it 900. Tell it OK. Alright, so now it sees the drive. So let's escape. Okay. And then let's send Control-Alt-Delete. See if it'll reboot. Now I have the H200 controller that I bought to experiment with, but I need to firmware flash that first in a PC in order to get it into IT mode. Alright, so it's just warning me that it won't enable write back. Alright, so it's booting into Windows. So no need to sit here. We got the drive configured, and then we'll go into Windows and do some magic in there. Alright, so we're successfully in Windows. Let's come up and see if it still sees my SSD drive in there. And of course, Windows Update wants to come up. Actually, this is the SSD here, I think. Yeah. So it does have some data on it. Okay, there's my virtual machine drive. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to go out and format that drive. So the first thing we want to do is get into a command prompt. Right click and run that as administrator, and then we're going to go into disk part, which is fdisk for Windows Server for Windows. We're going to do a list disk, and we'll see disk 1 is the one that we want, so we'll select disk 1, and then we're going to type in the word clean, and now we should see that disk 1 is cleaned. It's wiped, there's no GPT, nothing. Okay, so we'll go ahead and type exit here. Exit. I could have futzed around with computer management or computer manager to get rid of that, but it is a huge pain in the butt to do that. So some things are easier to go out to the command line and do. So let's go back to disk management, and now we should see a drive. I'm going to go ahead and use the GPT, the GUID partition table, even though we don't need to. And then I'm going to right click and do a new simple volume. Next, I'm going to use the entire drive. I'm going to assign the following drive letter of, what drive letter strikes me? Drive letter, let's do drive letter P. Now, can we? Yeah, we can use drive letter P. Next, I'm going to use REFS. RESPs? No. I'm going to use REFS because that is a self-healing file system, supposedly. And I'm going to call this drive VM store. Call it anything you want. Alright, so there's drive P now, VM store. There's the old SSD store. So now let's actually go in and start moving the machine storage. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is go to HyperV settings, and we're going to change all these to drive letter P. So that any new virtual machines I make will be over on drive letter P. Alright, and now we can right click on this first one and let's select move. Alright, and the wizard will pop up. We're going to click next, and we're only going to move the virtual machine storage. Next, we're going to move all the virtual machine data to a single location. Next, and we're going to move this to drive P. Virtual machines, which one is this? Yeah, just virtual machines. We'll select the folder. Give it a second to update here. There we go. I have 883 gigabytes free, so that machine should fit there very nicely. We'll click on next. Click on finish. And let's see how fast this happens. Now, normally in the real world, you would buy enterprise level SSD drives. So let's talk about that while we're waiting for the move to finish. In a real world environment, in a production environment, you would buy enterprise level SSDs. And some would say you would put them in a RAID 1 array at the very minimum. I say balderdash. I just want to run them separately and do backups using Veeam backup and restore. If you want to put them in a RAID 1 array, that's fine with me. I don't have any problem with that at all. I just don't see the sense of wasting 2 SSD drives for something that is non-critical like VM storage if you take other precautions. So, but like I said, normally you would not put you would put enterprise level SSDs in here in the real world, because if you've got a real client, that was quick. Anyway, what I was saying is if you've got an actual real client, you don't want to take a chance on that SSD failing because of intense utilization. And I'm just going to do just like I did on the other one. Alright, and then I'll go ahead and move the rest of these off camera. You don't need to see me moving each one, and we'll come back when all the moves are done. Alright, so if we go back now and check the settings on all these, they should be over on the P drive now, and they are. Let's just go through all these one by one. I don't need to have you, I just want you to see that they are all now on the P drive. So, take my word for it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut down this server. And then what I'm going to do is go over and physically remove the 256 gig SSD drive, and I am going to put a block, a blank block. I'm going to put a blank in there, just so we have the only drives we have in there will be the 2 SAS drives and the single SSD, and then we'll come back and see what happens when we boot that machine up. Looks like the battery error warning went out. I just need to, now that I have an SSD in this unit, it's going to draw less power than when I had a bunch of spinning hard drives in there. So I may start leaving this machine up a little more than I normally do, because that's one of the other benefits of an SSD is it draws less power. You only have 5 volts going to this thing instead of the 12 volt for the motor, so that'll help with power consumption. And eventually what I will do is replace the SAS drives with SSD with an SSD boot drive, and so this thing will end up having 2 SSDs in there, one to boot the operating system and one for the VMs. Alright, so I'm going to do a Control R a few times so it knows I want to get into the BIOS, the RAID BIOS, and it's warning me about virtual disk. So I'm going to go ahead and do C to continue, and yes. Alright, so now it only sees 2 virtual drives. I shouldn't need to do anything here except escape, and then it should reboot. So I'm going to hit escape here until it yes or OK, and then I'm going to send it the Control-Alt-Delete signal, and we'll see if it'll come back. You notice we didn't have that battery error this time when the controller came up. So alright, moment of truth here. Alright, so we should see 2 virtual devices, and it does. Good. That's a good sign. Alright, so it's booting into Windows. That's a good sign. Alright, so the lab HyperV machine is up. Let's, first things first, I want to go out and go to computer management. Want to just make sure we don't have any vestiges of that old SSD drive out there, and make sure that our drive letter has stayed, remained drive letter P. So we'll go into computer management and then go over here to disk management. And yes, it is still drive P, it's healthy, primary partition, yada yada. Let's go into Hyper-V, and we're gonna actually bring up the domain controller. So 2016 Lab 1 is the domain controller, so we're going to right click connect, and then I'm going to go ahead and start that machine up. Should boot up fairly quickly, I'm hoping. Alright. So it looks like that's fine. So we see we're on mcslab.local. Go check our IP address because we should be on subnet 20, and we are. And this is at also that VLAN we created when we did the Ubiquity equipment. So it looks like this server is a success. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to power off. I'm going to shut down this domain controller. And then we're going to switch over to our production server. And we're going to do the same thing over there we just did here. So I'm just going to go ahead and log out. And then we'll switch over to the other server. Alright, 1 Dell server down, 1 to go. So we're now over on our production server, and I put that SSD drive into slot 4. And I'm going to go ahead and power on the server now. Alright, there we go. And it sees an unconfigured drive if you look down here. Let's start with the beginning here. So these 2 drives are in a RAID 1 array. These 2 drives there's 2 drives in this RAID 1 array, and there's going to be a single one in this one. So we're going to come up to the root of the PERT controller, hit F2, create a new virtual drive, and we're going to accept this SanDisk drive. And what did I call that? SSD store. I'll just call it SSD Store 1 on this one. Tell it OK. And now we have a new virtual disk. So I'm going to hit escape. Tell it OK. And then it wants me to press Control-Alt-Delete. So we'll do that by hitting the macro here. Well, I've booted up to the production machine. And let's see if it sees that new hard drive in there. There is the drive there. So it looks like it has got an NTFS partition on it. Let's just go out and see. Yep, it looks like this was a Windows machine as well. So I could do it. I could try to do it here, but as you can see, the problem you're going to have is on these GUID volumes is you're going to have trouble once an operating system's been installed of getting rid of these EFI system partitions. So what I'm going to do is go out to a command prompt. So I'll just go to the Windows button, type in CMD for command. Then I'm going to right click and run that as administrator. Tell it yes. And then we're going to go into disk part. Now, you need to make sure you're watching this video in high def, or you may not see these commands. So the first thing we're going to do is list disk. Alright, so there's the 893 gigabyte hard drive that we want to modify the partition on. So I'm going to select disk 2. Okay. And we're going to clean it. Now be very, very careful with this command, because you can wipe out a system partition like you would not believe. Now we'll look at list disk again, and you'll see the 893 gig drive is no longer GPT. I'm going to exit out of here, and we're going to go back into computer management, and it should prompt us to that it wants to create a partition. So we're going to use GPT, even though it's under a 2 terabyte drive. I've just started getting in the habit now of using GPT. Next, and you can see it's going to be 915 gig. I'm going to cite drive letter P, just like we did on the other one. I'm going to format it with the REFS, and we'll go VM Store 1. Okay, whatever. We can have them be the same. You can come back and you can change volume labels later. It really doesn't matter. So there we go, VM Store 1 drive P. Now, previously I was moving a machine from SSD to SSD. Now I'm going to be moving machines that have spinning hard drives, and the images are on spinning hard drives to SSD, so the move will probably be a little bit slower. But the first thing I want to do is go into the HyperV settings, and I want to change the location of my virtual machines to drive P for both of these. Okay, that's done. So let's go ahead and move, start moving them one at a time. So we'll right click, choose move. Next, we're going to move the storage. Next, we're going to move all the virtual machines data to a single location. And that is going to be the P drive virtual machines directory. Next, and finish. And this one should be fairly quick. It's not a very big image. So that moved fairly quickly. Let's just right click and go to settings and check and make sure it has indeed been moved to the P drive. There it has been, and also the virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with moving the rest of these machines over. No need for you to sit around and watch. You can watch me do this one, and then we'll cut away on the video. Easy peasy, Japanesey, there you go. Alright, so we now have transferred all the virtual machines to the SSD drive, and now what we're going to do is we're going to confirm the removal of those 2 spinning hard drives and a RAID 1 array. I've taken those out now, and I've moved the SSD drive into another slot, so we'll have to do a little reconnoitering here, as they say in the military, or reconnoitering, or what is the term? Hell, I don't know. Yeah, these machines are slow to boot, but there's a reason for that. They go through several... Okay, let me hit Control R about 3 times. They go through several checks of devices to make sure everything is okay. And it's not very often you have to reboot a server. Usually they run months, years without having a reboot. Okay. Yeah, and it's telling me, okay, so there's a following virtual devices missing. I'm going to go ahead and load the configuration utility, and yes, so it's going to remove those 2 virtual drives, and I should see my, yeah, there it is. So all I shouldn't have to make any changes here. It's already kind of made them. So you see my boot disk is the 136 gig, and then you see the SSD stored down there. So I'm going to hit the escape key. I'm going to tell it OK, and then I'm going to send it the command to reboot, and then it shouldn't throw up an error message this time. We'll come back in a second. Alright, here comes our RAID controller again, and let's see if it finds 2 virtual disks, and then it should boot into Windows. And this is also kind of a confirmation the RAID controller has now got its new settings and is happy with them. Meanwhile, the other server that was having the battery failure issue is now gone green. So I guess the battery is taking a charge, but we're going to have to look into that. When we pull that unit open to put RAM in it, we'll double check that battery. Maybe it's just time for a replacement. Okay, 2 virtual drives found and no errors on that H700 controller. I really like that controller. I'm glad I spent the money. Now, whether the longevity of these SSD drives, we'll see how they do. You know, a lot of people say don't put, and I agree, don't put consumer grade SSDs in a customer's machine. Spend the money and get the enterprise level SSDs, because they're made to be read and written to quite a few more times than a regular consumer drive. But for our purposes, we don't use that server that much. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but I don't want to go out and tell people start buying off-the-shelf SSD drives if we don't know they're going to work. Okay, it's booting to Windows, so we'll go do a remote desktop session next. All right, so I've RDP'd into our server. Let's just come over here to computer management, and this is our production server. And then I want to show you a little utility I'm going to run on here just to verify that our disks are in good shape. And keep in mind also those SAS drives are going to be replaced with a single bootable SSD drive, and there you go, it's running REFS, the volume stores P, that's still working. Now let's run this little hard disk Sentinel program. I think my trial period on this is expired. We'll find out here in a minute. Now I ran across a lot of articles running an SSD with the H700. Some people reported that if you didn't have a Dell SSD drive in there, it would come back and give you some error message, some cryptic error message. I never had that problem, and it could be because my was up to date, and that may be why it didn't have an issue. So here's my Fujitsu drives, and they're both in excellent condition. You can see they've been up quite a few number of days. Now let's go to my SanDisk, and there it is, and it shows it's been powered on 108 days and 5 hours. So this drive has had some use, but it looks like it's in lifetime rights. It's had 2.78 terabyte written to it. No weak sectors are found. The temperatures are good. The smart values are okay. So we're assuming that drive is all right. So now let's get our virtual machines back up and running here. Oh, another thing I want to do is I want to run Crystal Diskmark on that new drive. So let's do that real quick. We'll start that run. I just want to see what kind of speed I'm getting, because a lot of articles on the web also said you don't get the full speed of that drive, and I'm just like, why wouldn't I get the full speed of that drive? So I'm going to run 5 tests at 1 gigabit, and then we'll come back when that's done. You can see the results for yourself. So here's our Crystal Diskmark test results, and as you can see, we're getting really good read and write speeds, both in sequential and 4K sequential. Quite an improvement. So yeah, they appear to work with the H700 controller. Now let me see what kind of IOPS I'm getting, because that's what I really care about. So I'm getting 52 on random reads, 52K on random reads, and 27K on 4K random writes. And random reads, I'm getting 7,700 IOPS, and on random writes, at 4K, I'm getting 11,484 IOPS, which is more than acceptable to me. So now I need to bring up some of these virtual machines. I'm done with this machine as far as moving stuff around, so I need to start up my phone system. So we'll start with that one first. And then I need to get my surveillance software, or my surveillance machine. I told you I'm running Blue Iris in a virtual machine. It works really well. I've tweaked it and gotten it to, oh wow, look how fast that booted up. And it works very well. I also need my maintenance machine up and running, because that runs that's where I run my Ubiquity software and some other monitoring software. Now, like I say, time will tell how these SSDs do. And the first thing I'm going to do once I get everything done here is I'm going to do a backup of all my virtual machines again, just to make sure that I don't have any problems. If I have any problems down the road with these SSD drives, I can do a restore if need be. Alright, let me go ahead and get my surveillance machine up and running. I can tell the virtual machines are booting a heck of a lot faster than they were on those spinning drives. Of course, it could have had something to do with the fact that they were not serial ATA3 drives, 6 gigabit per second drives. They were old ones. Those drives are made in 2011. It's time to retire them. Alright, now Blue Iris, we'll have to launch that here after it comes up. Now see, this Windows 7 machine didn't have that problem. We'll go ahead and launch Blue Iris. Alright, Blue Iris is up. Okay, it looks like we're good, so I can go ahead and minimize or close that. Let's come back here to our maintenance machine and run our Unify controller. This machine is running the Unify controller in the LAN sweeper. We set this virtual machine up a few weeks ago. I did a video on it. And while that's doing its thing, let's get our web hosting server up so that we have our websites available again. Now you notice I didn't start my Exchange server. I'm no longer using Exchange. When I had the domain crash, I went to Microsoft, and I have a server license out there I can use from Microsoft, their Office 365. And I decided rather instead of running my own Exchange server, I'll just run it in the cloud. Okay, and there's my web hosting server, so that should be up. Now let's come back and check. And Unify is up. So I've got all my virtual machines back up and running now, and they're running off of the SSD drive. So we're back over here on the lab machine, where all of our lab machines are run. And I just wanted to show you the read and write speeds on this drive and the IOPS I'm getting. And as you can see, what just popped up in the background is the Sentinel disk monitor. And you can see I've got a one of those Seagate drives. Its health is not the greatest. So this will be the first one that I replace the SAS drives in with an SSD. But let's see. So this SSD drive has been powered on 128 days and 1 hour, and it's had 2.83 terabytes of lifetime writes to it. So we shall see how it does in the long run. But I just wanted you to see the Crystal Disk Mark results on this as well. All right, so we have a smashing success on installing. Sorry about that. I've got the long cable tied up to the phone. I've had to quit using the Canon camera because I'm having some trouble getting that thing to focus reliably. But that's another story for another day. Suffice it to say, we got the SSD drives in there. They appear to be working fine. Time will tell. Again, backups, backups, backups. Do backups of, if you're not going to put them in a redundant drive array, like I have done, I'm kind of, out there on the edge. Make sure you're doing backups of your virtual machines. You don't want to lose any of that data. So now we have this SSD. So I got a couple, this is that 256 gig SSD plus, and I got a couple of options with this. I could put this into one of those Dell servers and use it as the boot drive for Windows, or I can put this into that SAN unit that I created with Exponology. I'll let you know what I decide later. But as a consequence, now I have all these Hitachi 1 terabyte drives that I took out of that server. These drives are back from, I believe it's 2011, and they've started developing some bad sectors on them. That's why I want to pull them out of production. I don't need them failing on me. So these drives will be retired. I was thinking about putting them in the SAN unit, the Exponology SAN unit. We'll see. It depends on what I decide. These things are, they consume a lot of power because they're spinning hard drives. And the goal is to replace all my spinning drives and all my servers with SSDs. That's a decision I've made. I think we're at the point now where SSDs are that reliable, or reliable enough as spinning drives were. And they use a lot less power, and they're just, easier to deal with. The other thing I wanted to share with you is one of my clients has decided, after a couple of years of talking to them, to go ahead and do a security system in their office to do cameras. So they got their copy of Blue Iris software. We're going to do a video on a day in the life of an IT guy of me putting in a camera system. I don't know if he's going to do 1 camera or 2 cameras, but I've gotten authorization from the client to film the event, the installation, and you're going to see how I've done it. And it's a real simple installation. I think he got 2 cameras in the software. It was under $300. The installation fees will be a little bit higher. Now, these cameras are not power over Ethernet cameras, but I have a way to deal with that, and we'll cover that in the video. So look for that upcoming as well. And then I've got a big video coming up on phone systems. We're going to be doing 2 videos. We're going to be doing one on we're going to revisit the 3CX phone system, and then I've had a lot of requests for the free PBX14. So we're going to be doing a video on that as well. So be looking out for those up and coming. Anyway, hope you found the video entertaining and informative as always. Give us a thumbs up down below if you like this video, and leave your comments down in the comments section. Again, the best way to contact me is either through the comments section or unclejoesplayhouse@gmail.com. Leave a message there if you want something answered. And again, thank you, Sasha, for sending me all this wonderful stuff. We're going to be doing videos upcoming here on putting the RAM in that server as well, or the RAM sticks that he sent me in those servers. And then I've got another video coming up, and some of you are going to love it, and some of you are going to hate it, or not want to see it, or whatever. And then we have the drawing coming up on the we're going to give away a Edge Router Lite here in the next week or 2. So keep an eye out for that video. Thanks again for watching. Come back and see us again. Tell your friends about us. Tell your friends about us if they don't already know. And donate, PayPal and Patreon. We take them both. And don't forget, we'll see you on the other side.